Untitled Chapter here, and today what we're going to be doing in this video is discussing the Dark Elves' new systems in regard to their main economic mechanic, the slave system, and comparing it from Warhammer 2 to Warhammer 3, and just sort of create a discussion around it. In this video I'm just going to showcase what each of the mechanics do, what their potentials are, the drawbacks and positives of each system, and I'm going to keep my personal bias out of it, okay? Many of you guys will already know what my opinions are, and if you want to hear more about that, you can come to a live stream and I'm more than happy to discuss it further. But in this video, I'm just going to showcase the facts, and then I'm going to create a community poll, which you can look at as of right now, and give your thoughts as to which one you think is better and why, if you choose to, okay? So what I've got here in Warhammer 3 in Immortal Empires is a Lock Here Failheart campaign that's on turn 30. It's on Legendary difficulty. And I've also got open at the same time Total War Warhammer 2 on a campaign that I did a little while ago in my spare time. It's a Lock Here Failheart campaign. It's on turn 71. So first thing I'm going to do is just talk about Warhammer 2's system, explain how it works, what you can do, how it can be abused, and I guess the pros and cons of this system, and then talk about it in terms of Warhammer 3 by comparison. Okay, so let's, just in case you're not familiar with how the system works in Warhammer 2. Now, obviously, this system can be very heavily abused because I'm making absolute tons of cash. And let's firstly explain how the basic function of slaves works, and then I'll explain how it can be abused. Okay, so you've got this tab over here called slaves. In Warhammer 2, slaves are sent to a specific province where they provide a multiplier on your base income. So for example, on Nagarond here, where we have 99% slaves, so we've got a maximum population of 17,500. It's almost reached its maximum, and of that we got 17,332, and you can see that the income increase. So for example, if we take this building here, income generated 300, and then it adds a huge modifier on top of that. Then that modifier can then be modified further by tax rate. So you can see there's quite a lot of modifiers on modifiers here, right? So, but there's also a drawback, right? Slaves can decline per turn, just be killed off or whatever. There's ways to mitigate that. The base amount, I think, is I think it's 10% of your slave income per turn. Sorry, your slave population per turn. So for example, if you've got 1,000 slaves and you have no modifiers reducing it, you'll lose 100 slaves every turn. But it's pretty easy to get modifiers to reduce it. You've got, slave market over here, slave decline rate minus 50%. There's technologies, there's lord skills, and you've got masters over here with sycophantic schema to reduce it. And it's possible to reduce it down to 0%, okay? So that, short of other modifiers, like for example changing this to sacrifice to Cain, you would just not lose slaves here at all. Now, you can lose slaves if a revolt occurs, if you end up losing one of the settlements, that kind of thing, right? Now, some of the drawbacks is that it causes public order problems, okay? It causes public order problems for that province that it's in, which is why you probably need to have some kind of public order modifier in the province in order to keep it up, especially if you're playing on legendary difficulty. Again, there are ways to mitigate those public order problems caused by slaves. And then you've got this tab over here, slaves, which this is a bit of like an Excel spreadsheet, which I know a lot of people can be have an aversion to, and that's fair enough. But this system here has got loads of information about how to manage your slaves. Okay, now the thing is with it is that you don't really ever have to use it. You can always, from the system here, just turn slaves all off. You just turn all off. But obviously, if you do that, you're not going to make anywhere near as much as your maximum potential in terms of income. But through the system here, you can have a look to see which provinces can house the most slaves, which provinces have the best public order that maybe you want to send them in there, because that way the drawbacks of sending the slaves there isn't going to be a problem. So for example, the Black Flood here, it's at 69% capacity, and extra slaves over here isn't going to cause me any problems. Same thing with Attain, same thing with Illyrian. Anyone that's in like a decent amount of positive public order, there's, there's a benefit to sending slaves there. But then you might also want to look at which are the richest provinces. Since it's a percentage modifier, you can have a look and see which ones make the most money. And these are the ones in this campaign that I've sent it to. So Attain, for example, making 54,000 at 100% capacity. You know, we're at 0% decline rate because I've put in those masters everywhere, because I don't want to lose my precious slaves. And, you know, you can modify it based on that, and you can see the effects of the slave, which is modified further by other things, okay, which we'll talk about in a bit. So all the information is here. I think it is really easy to read all this stuff. It's just a matter of whether or not you actually want to go through it. And honestly, most of the time, I don't even go through that much detail with it. Barely ever click these buttons up here. But that's up to you. The option is there if you want it, right? Now, the slaves can be modified via other things, such as buildings, you know, generating extra income for each slave, or for every 10, income generated per 100 slaves, 10, then modified by other things. And then you've also got the assassin over here, which can increase the income even further. So with modifiers on modifiers on modifiers, obviously this system can be very heavily abused, and even a single assassin can be worth absolutely thousands of gold per turn in a single province. And that's not even that many assassins there. And that's not even the best province for slaves. The best one is Toyevres, but only once you hit tier 5 because of this building here. And this one requires 3 masters in order to keep all the slaves in check, which is why we've got these master buildings here to increase our capacity. So that's basically the gist of it. Some people like it, some people don't, fair enough. But it is at least a system that allows the player to make decisions. Whether you like those decisions or not, that's entirely up to you. Now, let's talk about the Warhammer 3 system. Okay, slaves in Warhammer 3 are not a province-to-province system. It is a global system. Okay, so when you capture a settlement, okay, let's pick one that isn't a ruin. This one over here. When you capture a settlement, you can see that the faction slave capacity is increased by 100. As you increase the level of the settlement, you will increase the maximum number of slaves, right? Now, there's no housing of the slaves here specifically. They just are everywhere, right? Now, how do you spend the slaves, right? So if you go to a province like over here, here are how slaves are spent. There is ports. Ports will consume slaves per turn. As you upgrade this port, it will consume more slaves, but it will provide you an increase of income that's, you know, not 100% boost on what the base income is, but at the same time, you don't need any slaves in order to make money as the Dark Elves. It's just that you will make more money if you have slaves. Now, there's no direct public order problems caused by consuming the slaves here, and if you turn off collect income, which, by the way, in Warhammer 2, you can't turn off taxes in a particular province, right? But in Warhammer 3, you can. Now, even if you turn off the income, these buildings here will still consume slaves, okay? Then you've also got some commandments over here. Some of them will consume slaves, so growth, which I find in Warhammer 3, growth is very quick. Doesn't take long to grow your provinces. Look, we're turn 30 here, and this province here is already about to hit tier 4. But that will consume 50 slaves and provide income from slaves plus 10%. So what that 10% means is you take this building here, it generates 200, so that means it'll give it an extra 20. This building here, it's generating 300 through slaves, so it'll generate an extra 30. So an extra 10% here from this region, not including this one, will generate 50 extra gold per turn. Then you've also got this building here. No longer does it like reduce slave decline rate or give you a big increase to the income of slaves. What it does is give you more housing for the slaves and will actually provide you a few slaves per turn. But even if you get the tier 4 one, 10 slaves per turn is enough to compensate you for basically a tier 1 port or a tier 1 artisan house. So no province is ever going to passively make as much slaves as what it will need unless you don't actually build these buildings. Now, there is no problem getting slaves in Total War Warhammer 3, because if we take Lockyer here, you can see my capacity. We'll go over some more stuff over here in a bit. We can house about another 1,000 slaves. So I'm going to sack Shangwu, which doesn't really have many troops in it. It's just a small garrison. And I'm going to hit it. Yep. It's on legendary difficulty, so I needed to save. And then I'm just going to auto that. Also, it's probably running slow because I've got both games open. So I got 13 slaves just from winning the battle, but then in post-battle loot options, I can sack it for 636 slaves, bringing me nearly to full. Now, if we hover... Come on, you can do it, game. If we hover over this stuff, we've got a little bit of information. We can see that I'm actually using up 551 slaves per turn. I've actually got quite a few settlements, and we've got Black Arcs all over the place, so they're out plundering stuff. So all I really need in order to pay for my slaves in any given turn is one battle against a minor city with no major forces there, right? And that'll pay for all the slaves. And you can also see down the bottom here, slave population high. So as you accumulate slaves... it's not based on the percentage of your max capacity, but actually based on the number of slaves that you've got. So, for example, at the beginning of the campaign, you won't be able to get -2 control all provinces. That won't be there. So, at the beginning of the campaign, you'll have a capacity of about 1,000, so you can get -1. Then at 5,000, that's when you get -2, and it comes with some positives as well. And then the next threshold is at 10,000. So, at 10,000 slaves, you'll go to -3 public order all provinces. And I'm not sure if there's any more above that, but I suspect at maybe 20,000, there'll be another one after that. But I never got to that in any of my campaigns. Also, a thing to note, it's turn 30, and I've actually already achieved short campaign victory. So you can get victory very early on in the Dark Elf campaign. It's the required victory conditions is... control some of these settlements and then occupy loot stack 30 different settlements, right? Using Black Arcs, that's pretty easy to do, especially with Lockyer. Okay, so we generate those slaves and we spend those slaves. Now, how do you manage the slaves? What decisions does this system offer? We no longer have a spreadsheet to look down because it's done automatically for you. So how do we use the slaves? Well, apart from it being done automatically, right? Also, resource buildings do not consume... Hang on, let me look at, what was this one here? Resource buildings do not consume slaves. It's primarily the ports and the estates of the masters. Sorry, this one here. Guild halls. Those are the ones that will consume the slaves. You've also got your edicts over, so your rights over here. So if we compare them to Warhammer 2, so I've got that up there. That's for Warhammer 3. He's got the same rights, but there's different costs of the slaves. Also, the negative penalty from the Shrine of Cain, Sacrifice to Cain, that one is gone in Warhammer 3, so it's all positive there now. So it takes away any sort of drawback from having it. This is just a pure positive. Spend 400 slaves, get this benefit for, was it 15 turns, which is a pretty long time. That's now a really good right? Okay. Then you've got these things here called dictats, which... sounds weird, but that's just what they're called. Okay, so the way that these work is that you can use each one of these once every 5 turns, but you can only use it once on a single province. So if you've only got one province, you'll only be able to use one of them at a time. But if you've got 3 provinces, you'll be able to have essentially all 3 of them active at any given time. They're kind of like additional, what's it called? Commandment effects. So this one over here, fight to the death, spend 200 slaves, get 20 control. So obviously this one here is useful for preventing revolts. This one over here will give you 2 control per turn for 5 turns and instantly generate 1,000 gold. Then this one over here will generate 50 growth and reduce construction costs for all buildings. So in the province that you want to grow the fastest, let's just say it was this one here, you want to pop this one down to hyper speed up the growth. Okay, now no other province will be able to activate that, as you can see here, for 5 more turns. And I can't activate the other 2 dictates here until this one has expired, right? Now if we have a look over here in terms of public order, which they're all bad, but if we have a look at the worst offender, This one over here, it's getting pretty close to revolt. So maybe we want this one to not revolt. Okay? And as for where you put this one, maybe the next worst public order offender. Pop that down, because it doesn't really matter where you get that 1,000 gold from. Okay, and that's basically it. That's all you really need to know about the slaves in terms of the management side of things in Warhammer 3. Now, in terms of the modifiers, what can you do to modify it? There are some technologies, okay? So, some notable ones in here, like this one. Income from slaves plus 3%, okay? So, what that means is if your slave income is 1,000, that'll make you, 30 extra gold. Comparing that to Warhammer 2, for example. What that one does is reduce the slave decline rate, right? What do the heroes do? So we've got a master over here. What does the master do? At Sycophantic Schema. Control +2 local province, income from slave plus 10% local province. So again, if you're making 1,000 gold from slaves specifically in a province, that guy will make an additional 100. Basically, there is no way to make this guy here make a profit in any given province, unless it's like maybe a 4-region province and you've got all the slave things completely built up. Maybe his upkeep cost might be compensated by Sycophantic Schema, and that might be useful to maintain the public order penalty. Now, it's also important to note that the public order penalty -2, all provinces, that will still apply to regions that are not consuming slaves. So if I find one over here, this province here is not consuming slaves whatsoever, right? Not consuming them, doesn't consume them, nope, doesn't consume them. But if you have a look at the public order here, do you see where it says faction -2? That's this here. And again, it can go up further. So this, having loads and loads of slaves can be a downside, especially in really underdeveloped provinces. So as you get more and more housing of slaves, you're probably going to want to make sure globally that you have sorted out your public order, global public order benefits. So there's a few things you can do in the tech tree here and there, but Malekith also has a skill which confederating him is quite difficult. And then also at Nagarond, there is a building that will provide global bonuses to public order. Aside from that, you might want to have to build this building here in order to maintain control, even if you're not consuming slaves in a province, because it's a global effect. So that's what the master does there. Now, what does an assassin do? I don't have any assassins in the campaign active at the moment, but if we go over to here, we can have a look at its effects. Increase slave income. It says increase slave income, but what it actually does is generate slaves. So it generates 10 slaves per turn base, and then provides 10 more as you provide those 3 points. So it can provide a maximum of 20 slaves per turn. So this is just to help offset the consumer. It doesn't actually increase the income of slaves. So in terms of how much can you abuse this mechanic, not very much at all. The modifiers are extremely low. Even with the masters, you're just rarely going to even be able to get the income up, because there's no tax rate as well in Total Warhammer 3. There's just improved income, so there's no way to put a modifier on that particular modifier. So this is only really useful if the character is actually passing through the area. I wouldn't bother putting him in even the richest slave province. It just isn't worth keeping the master there, which allows the master to be better now attached to an army, where previously in Warhammer 2, I didn't attach them in my armies. I had them maintaining my ridiculous income, and then my armies just did without masters. And then the assassins can do the same thing. They can provide those slaves anywhere. You can put your slaves, put your assassins in your army, get those extra points into slaves, and then just have them go off and do things. Now, if you remember, there's a particular follower in Warhammer 2 and 3 that provides... I'll just try and find it. I know I've got lots of in this one. Let me just try and find it. If I can find it, it's in here. It's like called Slaver. That's what I'm looking for. I know I've got some, I just got to find one. It's probably right down the bottom. Yeah, it would be because it's alphabetical. There we go. Okay, so if I grab this slaver, what it does is casualty captured post-battle plus 15%, income from slave pens and slave markets plus 5% all provinces, provides a global bonus. In Warhammer 3, I don't have one in that particular campaign, but I did in another one. What it does is provide the casualties captured post-battle and then provides 10 slaves per turn. So getting loads of those is a way to just generate passive slave income. Passive slaves if you're not fighting enough battles and starting to drop down on that. And the way to get that follower is you get a very small chance every time you occupy a settlement and very small chance every time you kill captives when you win a battle. So those are the two different slave systems. Again, I'm not going to give you my opinion on it in this video. Maybe a little bit of my bias slipped through here and there. It's very difficult to remain completely objective, but I have tried. Just giving you guys the facts on how these two slave systems work. Now, if you want to be involved in the discussion further, I'll have a poll up where you can give your opinions on which you think is better, the old Warhammer 2 system or the new Warhammer 3 system for the slaves. And you can always just leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Anyway, that's the end of this video here. I think I've covered everything that you need to know, apart from like the tiny little details, like tiny bits of technology that don't really matter, and lord skills such as Malachus. I think Malachus provides plus 5% income from slaves faction-wide in his skill tree. Those kind of modifiers don't make that big of a deal, so that's why I'm not really focusing on it. But obviously there is a gigantic difference between how much you can modify the slave income in Warhammer 3 compared to what you can do in Warhammer 2. Anyway, that's the end of this one here, guys. Let me know in the comments below. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time, fuckers. Bye.